Is Series 5 of Doctor Who the best? It's the first of the Moffat era, an era beloved by some and criticised by others, but time and time again this series seems to place very high in fan rankings. But does it deserve to be there? That's what we're exploring today, alongside why the 11th Doctor works so well this series, why Moffat's lack of restraint harms his own writing, and why one episode beloved by fans and viewers leaves me cold on every rewatch. This is Doctor Who Series 5. Welcome to the Fairytale. The 11th Hour may be one of the most important episodes of the show, definitely at its release. The RTD era had been a mega success and the show was about to go through its first major shake-up since its return in 2005. Not only had the popular 10th Doctor regenerated, but the creative team behind the show's revival had also left, leaving a whole new team of writers, producers and actors to carry the show forward. Leading the charge was the incredibly Scottish Stephen Moffat, a massive Doctor Who fan who was no stranger to the show, having written some of the most popular outings during both the 9th and 10th Doctor's tenures. And although this might sound enough to please any worrying fans, there were definitely still some doubters. When a franchise changes hands, there's going to be some worry, not just amongst viewers, but production teams and broadcasters as well. Change is scary. I don't like it when my partner parks in a different spot at Lidl. That's fucking satanic. But change when lots of money and a popular brand is involved is, from what I understand, even scarier than that. The 11th Hour couldn't just be a good episode of Doctor Who, it couldn't just be a good series opener. It had to be a great big bit of proof that the show itself was the star, and no matter who the lead or the creative team was, it would still be a success. Unfortunately, the 11th Hour decided to be so good that it kind of shows up future series and era openers. This episode is so clever, not just in the sense of plot and story and all that, but in its style, its execution, its vibe. This episode has got vibes. It doesn't feel any less confident than what's come before it, and although the main beats of the show are there, TARDIS introduction and stuff, there's a whole new energy to it. It's not afraid that it's new or different, it shows it off, while still making sure it pleases the fans that have been watching since the revival. Now this sounds like I'm a Moffat superfan. I'm not. This is episode 1 of his era and we've got a long way to go. I wouldn't even say I'm in love with this episode. It's not one I would necessarily pop on just to watch, but I admire it so much. As a writer myself and someone who makes short films and theatre, I can't help but be in awe of its craft. To have this much guts and confidence from the off, to be able to establish the tone and feel of the series from the very beginning is not an easy thing to do, and this episode makes it look effortless. I think starting with the Doctor crash landing in young Amelia's garden is just the perfect way to open for a few reasons. Firstly, it creates that fairy tale whimsical tone that will continue throughout the series, and we'll be talking about that a lot in this video. But also, what young kid hasn't dreamt of the Doctor suddenly appearing at their house? It's using that childlike wonder to start its main story, a thing that will continue not just through Series 5, but through Amy Pond's storyline as well. Turning the Doctor into the companion's imaginary friend is basically a way of turning many viewers' childlike innocence and dreams into the story they're about to watch. And the way this opening is filmed helps create that tone even further. The old, slightly rustic house, the overgrown garden, the little burst of light from the TARDIS and the regeneration energy. All of this is used to create that magical feeling. The first 15 minutes of this episode just feels incredibly comforting, which is a perfect feeling to create when establishing change. I think these scenes make a viewer feel almost nostalgic, without pandering to fan wank nonsense and meaningless cameos. Instead, it plays on a viewer's childhood memories and dreams, and then fears. The introduction of the crack in the wall is masterfully handled. It's that silly little thing that an adult would barely notice, but to a child is the scariest thing in the world. It's very Doctor Who, and it works. The first act of this episode is definitely slower than other series openers, but it never feels slow. Instead, it just gently holds a viewer's hand, guiding them through the concept of the series while establishing characters, threat, and the storyline to come. And it's really important that this first act works, otherwise the entire arc of Amy Pond would fall flat. If we don't care about this late night fish fingers and custard encounter, then we would never care that she's been waiting to travel to stars for such a long time. We have to believe these scenes, we have to care for them, and we have to remember them. This isn't a character introduction that can be brief and rely on us coming back to get to know the characters later on. Everything has to be established and developed from the off, and I think Moffat crafts this opening perfectly. And the rest of the episode is very good too, but before we go any further, I think we should look at the new lead of the show. It's fair to say that Matt Smith had a very hard job when coming into the show. David Tennant was ridiculously popular as the Doctor, and the general public adored him as the character. He really was the face of the brand as it reached its peak in popularity. It was his face on the toys, the games, the magazines, the bed covers, all of it. So for Matt Smith to come in, a completely unknown actor to most, and take over the show at only 26 years old, which is only 1 year older than me, and I find that sickening, must have been pretty nerve-wracking. And maybe he was nervous, maybe Matt Smith was shitting through the eye of a very nervous needle. You wouldn't know it though, because he's really good. Matt Smith brings a new energy to the Doctor, and it's there almost immediately. He captures that old man in a young body straight away. I believe he's lived a complicated life. Also, the Doctor's dialogue is quite different to most other main characters on TV, and he delivers it so naturally. I believe his quips just as much as I believe his sadness or fear. They find a really nice balance for his eccentricness for most of the series, allowing him to feel alien without being too stupid or drifting into parody. And I really like how different he is to 10. The 10th Doctor was very confident, a ladies' man who knew he was popular, while the 11th Doctor is a bit more geeky, still confident but it's less bravado. He fits this fairy tale tone, this odd man, slightly whimsical, always bizarre, who is as comfortingly familiar as he is an intriguing stranger. Another thing I really like about the writing of the 11th Doctor in this series is his relationship with the Time War. Now, if you've watched my other videos, you will know I really like the introduction of the Time War. It's just a very clever plot to introduce to the show, adding a lovely arc to the central character and allowing us to connect with him as we watch him mourn and grieve. Also, Last of the Time Lords is just a great arc phrase. It's simple, memorable, and boils down the central conflict of our character in one sentence. Trust me, that is not an easy thing to do, and they do it incredibly well. However, you can have too much of a good thing. Keep something around for too long and it's no longer an interesting aspect to the show, but instead a tired trope. When you have a main character whose whole personality revolves around them always moving forward, never looking back, sticking with one story beat for too long not only goes against that core trait, but also against one of the main themes of the show. That's why I like how they deal with it through Series 5. It's mentioned, it's still there, but it hovers in the background. It's no longer a central aspect of the whole story being told. The Beast Below uses it to explore the Doctor's anger and Amy's impulses and intelligence while building on their relationship, but then it quietly goes. It feels like this is a Doctor who has come to terms with what happened, or at least is trying to. It no longer haunts him during every plot. The Last of the Time Lords isn't a title really, but a fact. It allows the series to move on, to keep fresh while still building on what's come before. Amy Pond is the 11th Doctor's first and most important companion. Although he later shares half a season with Clara, the Ponds just feel like 11s. When I think of this era, I think of Matt Smith, Karen Gillan, Arthur Darvill, and sometimes Alex Kingston when she can be bothered to turn up to work. I think Amy Pond has one of the greatest story concepts. A little girl who met the Doctor once and dreamt of him her whole life, angry that his promise of travelling the stars never came true. That's great, what a wonderful place to start a character's journey. Then he comes back and lets her down again, forcing her to wait for another 2 years. When he finally returns, it's the night before her wedding, and finally she gets that trip in the TARDIS she's been waiting for nearly her whole life. The conflict she has wrestling between becoming an adult or living that childhood dream is just an amazing arc to give to a character. There's so many ways you can take that story, and it allows the companion to be complicated and at times perhaps even unlikable. There's a very simple, very real drama about it, giving the show its more down-to-earth dramatic storylines alongside the monsters and mayhem that make Doctor Who what it is. And yet it still feels unique. These character plots aren't as naturalistic as, say, the RTD ones were, this time allowing them to tip into that fantasy angle that the main arc is going for. Amy Pond really is the girl plucked from a fairy tale, a name that could be from an old-fashioned book, and the fact she sells disguise in her nightie, very like Wendy in Peter Pan. She suits the style of the series so well. Thematically, everything this season just gets it, from the characters to the main arc and the Monster of the Week storylines. There's a lot of variety, lots of new and exciting ideas, but its tone is always consistent. I know I go on a lot about tone in these videos, but it's so important because when it is consistent, everything around it just works, as evident in this series. I think the first few episodes do a really good job at establishing the Doctor and Amy's dynamic. In episode 1 we watch as Amy learns to trust the Doctor while coming to terms that her childhood dreams were in fact real, and then in episode 2 the script does a good job at separating the pair, allowing us to see how they both work alone. I always think the quicker you can break up the Doctor and companion, the better. It doesn't have to be every episode, but we need to see them be independent, and it allows both characters to be doing something interesting in the story. Otherwise, you can really easily slip into the companion standing around while the Doctor does something clever, and that's rarely interesting. Victory of the Daleks is a little weaker than the first 2 outings. It's got some great ideas, and I think that's true for the entire series. Even when things don't work for me, it's usually the execution rather than the concept. The imagination of this series is brilliant. I like the Daleks getting involved in World War II, and the bit when they start turning all the lights on in London is good. I do think this could be played much more threateningly. I think the visual is too good to waste, and I don't think the episode quite achieves the drama of that moment. Also, the Doctor being pally with Winston Churchill never sat right with me. Even if you ignore a lot of his history, which this episode does, their chemistry just doesn't ring true. The banter feels forced and almost too careful. And then of course you've got the new Daleks. The new Dalek design just looks like a pride parade threw up on them. They are ridiculous. They look like props from RuPaul Drag Race rather than the most deadly villains in the universe. Like, I like that they tried to change them up, but this was not the one. Honestly, what designs did they turn down? How nutty were the others? Though, issues aside, there are still some great things in this episode. The scene where the Doctor rages at the Dalek is written and played perfectly. And Amy's quite good in this one. The ending with Fleabag's robotic dad allows us to see her more sensitive, romantic side, which works well for her arc. However, it really is the next story where this series just turns it up a gear. Now, I have no idea if people will agree with me or hate me for this, but I think this two-parter is so nearly perfect. Every good fairy tale needs a bit of darkness, and this story just pulls that magical whimsy away and allows the scarier aspects of the show to have the spotlight. This story was a risk. Blink was a massive success, searing the Weeping Angels into the public consciousness almost overnight. People adored that episode, so basically doing a sequel to it could have been a big mistake. One of the reasons the Weeping Angels were so good in their first appearance is due to how little we knew about them. We knew they were dangerous, and that was kind of it. They really are the fear of the unknown, and as soon as you give the audience too much information, you lose that. So this two-parter had to really earn bringing them back, and I think it does. This story is incredibly busy, it has a lot going on, what with the return of Riversong, all the soldiers, the Weeping Angels, the main story arc, blah 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 blah, and yet it never feels stuffy. Everything is given its moment. This story, definitely the first episode, is brilliantly paced. The new additions to the Angels are enough to make them new and interesting again, but don't take away from what originally made them so iconic. I love the idea that the image of an angel becomes a weeping angel. That's so imaginative and fun, and the fact this story, they're breaking necks, is incredibly dark. I know we don't see anything, but that's still bold for tea time viewing. This story just makes the Angels feel dark and scary still. They lose none of their threat that they had in their first appearance. Instead, Moffat builds on it, adding new layers and tricks without ever indulging too much in their actual backstories or origins. Another character that is reintroduced to this story is Riversong, and again, not one that necessarily needed to return. River could have easily been a one and done character in the Library two-parter, someone we know the Doctor will one day meet again, but something that we as viewers don't get to see. This easily could have happened, and honestly, if Moffat hadn't become showrunner, it probably would have. But Moffat did become showrunner, and in doing so, his love affair with the character was born. It is obvious just from watching the show and reading the scripts that Moffat adores Riversong. He is having so much fun writing for her, too much fun at times. Calm yourself, Stephen. Even though I do think River's storyline becomes far too convoluted as it goes along, in Series 5 she's kinda perfect. She's the right balance of being fun, flirty, but also forceful, brave and real. I believe her in this series. Yeah, she's big and exaggerated, but it feels natural to the world that we're in. The rest of the supporting cast are really strong in this story. It looks amazing, the effects and the sets just pop. The storytelling is incredibly effective. The twist when all the statues are actually angels is perfectly revealed, leaving enough time for the audience to work it out, but not being so obvious that it makes all our other characters look fucking thick. Also, the Crack makes another appearance. I think it's fair to say that when this series started, most people would assume that Amy's Crack was just going to be another bad wolf, with it popping up briefly in most episodes before the final. I am very aware I just called it Amy's Crack. It is. It is! Who else's crack is it? And although there are elements of the bad wolf structure in there, in episode 5 they change up the game. The crack in the wall is no longer a little tease, but instead a massive plot point to the story. It's a very different change of pace for the show as a whole, and I think a welcome one. It's another way of establishing a new era, changing how the series arc is structured and executed, and I think they balance it incredibly well. It's not too plot heavy that it suddenly becomes serialized, but it's detailed enough that it builds a richer mystery than what we're used to. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, it's just different styles of storytelling, and I appreciate the change. I like how the crack is used in the climax of this story, but still letting the mystery of its origins grow. It's good stuff. And then, while the arc is being built upon, so is the character drama, with Amy finally revealing to the Doctor that she ran away the night before her wedding. And this scene is played so subtly, so heartfelt and emotive that it's played like a fucking sex comedy. This is a new segment to the videos that I will be calling Moffat's Lack of Restraint. Now, Moffat is a very good writer. Even if you don't always like his style, you can't deny that the man is incredibly skilled. And I've always had mixed feelings on his work. I think Douglas's Cancelled is really good, definitely the final 2 episodes. I think Sherlock crashed and burned at the end, unfortunately showing that the cracks of the show had been there since the beginning, and I think Coupling just isn't for me. It's dated now, but I can see why people liked it at the time. But he is good, he knows how to create exciting plots and good dialogue. But if there's one thing that constantly holds him back in my opinion, it's the fact he never knows when to stop. Moffat has no restraint. If a joke or a plot beat has made him laugh, or it's a twist that he thinks will shock you silly, you can guarantee it's going to be in that script, even if it doesn't fit. Now, there are 2 moments in Flesh and Stone that stand out for me for all the wrong reasons. The first one is that we see the angels move. Now, I know I literally went on about how they keep them unique and never break the fear of the unknown thing, but I lied. They do, just for one scene, and it is so not needed. It doesn't ruin all the work the story's already done, but it does slightly undermine it. It adds nothing. The moving adds no fear. If anything, it takes it away. However, the other one, the biggest lack of restraint, comes at the end of the episode. The final scene, the emotional payoff with very little climax, if you will. This may be one of the only moments where most of the fans and viewers are in agreement. This scene does not work. And even Moffat agrees, stating in an interview that there's a brilliant scene to be written there and I entirely avoided writing it. I played it for laughs and it's so wrong. And he's right, that's the major issue. There is a lovely scene to be had here, a woman who's scared of growing up, who's suddenly shocked that her imaginary friend came back for her and now has to decide what life she wants. That is such an interesting inner conflict to explore, but hiding it through a rushed sex comedy goes against everything that's built up to this scene. It also goes against the entire tone that has been set. There's a whimsical fantasy tone throughout this series. It's magical and feels very much like a fairy tale, and I don't mind breaking that. Breaking expectations can be good, and a tonal shift is a clever way to do it. But not like this. This doesn't subvert expectation, it just confuses an audience. It feels incredibly out of nowhere and unearned, and it's a shame because the scenes should be so good. And it can be funny and silly, that's fine, but it needs heart. It needs to be connected to the style and the themes of the series, and this isn't. This feels like a deleted scene from Coupling, and like Coupling, it feels dated. And although this is definitely the worst offender of the season, it's not the only time where I think Moffat got carried away. In episode 1, the moment where the Doctor is getting changed and Amy refuses to turn away never worked for me. I understand what he's going for, but the joke isn't funny enough to forgive just how shitty this is. And I don't mind shitty characters, I like complicated people in my dramas, but it has to be explored. My issue is that every time Amy does something slightly questionable, it's usually played as a joke. It's not asking the audience to judge or question her actions, it's asking us to laugh and move on, and that feels slightly shallow. It's okay, I know it could be argued that it's part of the arc and it helps the episode Amy's choice, and if this side her stopped here, I'd be fine with it. But it doesn't. It continues. On her wedding day. Not once, but twice Amy makes a pass at the Doctor, first trying to get him to kiss her in front of her and Rory's entire wedding party. And once again, it's played as a joke. And again, this is fine if there are any kind of consequences, but there's not. Amy treats Rory kinda shitty and then the characters just move on from it so the audience is expected to as well. It's these little moments for me that harm the great character stuff that this series is so good at. I just want them to pull away a bit. Not everything has to be a gag or a quippy moment, and I think this series occasionally falls into that. Also, you have River, she's the one who could do the flirty stuff, the innuendos, the making the Doctor squirm. Amy doesn't need to be that person as well. It annoys me because her main arc is so good and her dynamic with the Doctor is so interesting that these little moments just feel so unnecessary. And the final scene of Flesh and Stone barely has much of an impact going forward. Rory should be absolutely fuming, he should be distraught, he should want to kill a man. And it is kind of explored in Vampires of Venice, an episode I really love by the way, and I think people sleep on it, but it is one of the least interesting parts of the episode due to it kind of being pushed aside quite quickly. Amy literally asks him to stop going on about it in the beginning, and he does. I do like the Doctor and Rory's dynamic in this, I like that he doesn't trust him, and the bit where he yells that he makes people dangerous to themselves is great, but it's so short-lived that it doesn't really go anywhere outside of these scenes. I still love the episode though, vampire fish that actually get a lot of screen time. Hell yeah, that is what I want. Amy's Choice is another good episode. It is slower paced than the ones that have come before it, but it's never boring. I like the tension between the characters and Amy's conflict is realised really nicely throughout. I do think this episode would be stronger if the scene from Flesh and Stone wasn't there. Take away the physical stuff and suddenly everything is based on emotional connections and feelings, and that's just more interesting. But this really should be it. This episode should be the end of any kind of flirtiness or sexual tension between Amy and the Doctor, otherwise its whole purpose is kind of lost. Okay, enough moaning. I've touched on the arc a bit already, so I thought it'd be more fun to delve into what I mean exactly every time I bang on about tone and theme and how this series uses it when building its main storyline. Let's start with tone, because that's a lot easier. When it comes to storytelling, tone basically establishes everything, from the atmosphere and style to the characters and plot. Tone is, in my opinion, one of the most powerful tools a writer can use, as it helps guide an audience through the narrative and ensures that they're feeling all the emotions you want them to feel. If you mess up the tone, you can suddenly derail your whole story, and the audience will view it in a completely different light than you originally intended. For example, a strange man breaks into the garden of an old house while a little girl is home alone. He asks if she wants to run away with him at night. This is the opening of the 11th Hour. This could also be the opening of an horrific horror film if you wanted it to be. And that is where tone comes in, and it's why it's so important. Get the tone of this scene wrong and suddenly your family tea time show is getting investigated by Ofcom. And I know I sound like I'm joking, but can you just imagine how this would play if the tone was even slightly off? Instead, Moffat makes sure that everything feels whimsical and magical, from the setting and the dialogue to the comedy and the characters. Amelia wishes for Santa, the Doctor eats fish fingers and custard. She's called Amelia Bond, for Christ's sake. It's as fantasy fairy tale as you can get, and due to this, it feels normal for the story. However, tone isn't just important to individual scenes or episodes, but for a season as a whole. If the rest of the era had this gritty, naturalistic realism to it, the audience would feel cheated. You promised us whimsy and wonder, and you have to deliver on that. It doesn't mean you can't experiment, but there has to be consistency. And Series 5 is consistent. The Star Whale sounds like a fantasy book, the Angel two-parter feels like a grim fairy tale. We have vampires, an episode where dreams themselves are deadly, a painter that sees the world differently to other, and a take on Pandora's box. You have The Girl Who Waited and The Last Centurion. All of this feels like a fairy tale book. It feels childlike but never childish. And it's the same for The Crack in the Wall. If the big bad of this season had been Satan himself, you'd get whiplash. But building your entire narrative around the most simplistic of scares keeps the tone consistent. Theme, on the other hand, is always a little harder to explain and pinpoint, as people take different things away from different pieces of art. And that's good, like if we all viewed something the same, it would be boring. I like to think of the theme as the heart of a story, something that's driving the narrative and the characters forward. It's important, but should always feel natural to what is being told. When writers get too bogged down in theme, you can usually feel the writing. It all becomes a bit too mechanical. Luckily, the themes in Series 5 are broad enough that there's a lot of room to explore. In my opinion, the main themes of Series 5 are growing up, love, and loss, and like any well-plotted season, every episode has one or more of these themes throughout. Sometimes it's a central conflict, other times it's a little subtler, but it is there in either the episode's concept, such as Amy's choice, or in characterful moments, such as Amy crying in Vincent and The Doctor. Even in the lodger, the theme is strong. Craig is a man who really wants to settle down and balks at the idea of travelling, a lovely contrast to our main Doctor and companion duo. I think this is why the latest two series finals have been poorly received. The theme of the series isn't realised in the end. Season 1 is all about foundlings and abandonment and magical mysteries, all of which barely feature, suddenly battling the god of death when death hadn't been a major theme of the series. It's weird, and most viewers probably wouldn't even notice or pay much attention to it, but it does affect people's enjoyment of a story, because we are all so used to story structure. We have watched a lot of stuff and we have read a lot of stuff that it's kind of naturally part of us. Even The Crack in the Wall captures all three of the Series 5 themes. Growing up and childhood is captured because it's the crack from her childhood bedroom that's now following her and haunting her wherever she goes. And love and loss is captured because it fucking eats Rory. Again, this may feel really simple, but I do think it's why this series works for so many. Its tones, themes and story are all very neatly combined, that it just allows you as a viewer to immerse yourself into the tale that is being told. Okay, for me, this is the weakest story within the season, however that's not to say it's without its merits. Like I've said already, nearly all the ideas and concept of this series are very strong, however I think this story never gets going and wastes a lot of its potential. Now, I know who wrote this one. I know it's Chibnall, and I know people are either going to want me to hate on him or will be very angry if I do. But I'm not going to do either. I will say that I do not like the way Chibnall writes Doctor Who. It's just not for me. If it's your thing, that's amazing, but for me it leaves me cold nearly every time. But that's not to say he's a bad writer, because he's not. As a theatre nerd, I have read a lot of his plays and they are very good. Plus, the first series of Broadchurch whipped up a frenzy in the UK, which a lot of dramas can only dream of. He's a good writer, just in my opinion, not a good Doctor Who writer. Now, I think the ideas in this story are good, but they're just incredibly mishandled. Immediately, I struggle with a plot that's about the Silurians being allowed to be part of Earth due to them being here first, ending with them just going back to sleep like nothing happened. It's a conclusion merely designed because they don't want aliens roaming around freely in the Doctor Who world, and that's fine, that would be a big change to suddenly introduce, but then just don't do this story. The issue is the politics and the conflict of this episode are extremely interesting, but it plays it so safe. It's all very surface level and it just makes it feel very pointless. Also, I find the second part of this incredibly boring. The first part is a lot of build-up, so Cold Blood really should have been a riot, and it's just not, and I think it's a shame. I think this story could have been great, and it's really wasted. You can't end this with the good guys being like, yes, you should be allowed to be on part of Earth, but we're just not ready yet. We'll come back again soon. Doesn't work, feels weird. The ending, however, with Rory is incredibly good. I just think it's such a shocking ending, and again, very different to what we've come to expect from the show previously. Having such a major death, or fake death, halfway through the season wasn't something we got in the previous era, so it's a great twist. Also, Matt Smith and Karen Gillan fucking nail this scene. They play the emotions so well, it just feels so real and raw, and they kill it. Another episode that I feel is weaker is The Lodger. I just don't really like this one. Again, good concepts, but it's not for me. I just think it's the one where they try too hard with the Doctor. I always hate it when the Doctor is written as quirky in this way, because it just makes the character feel dumb rather than unusual. Like, he's been to Earth many times. He lived here when he looked like Wurzel Gummidge. He knows what football is. He's not thick. He knows what he knows David Beck. He fucking knows Posh and Becks. And I know it's a silly thing to get caught up on, but it's just how the whole episode makes me feel. I like the Doctor to feel like an alien because of his differences, because of his presence, not just because he's stupid and naive to basic things. It's just a very simple way of writing it, and I just don't connect to it. But that's me. It leaves me cold. Maybe you love it. Moving on. I have honestly dreaded talking about this one. I've rewritten my notes so many times, and I'm still not happy with them. But here we go. Vincent and the Doctor is an episode that I can take or leave. There, I said it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know this episode is beloved by fans. I know it's seen as one of the most strongest of the season. I know people cry themselves silly, and you know what? I get it. This is by no means a bad episode. I understand the praise it gets. It just doesn't do anything for me. Now, I have never been a massive fan of Richard Curtis's writing, so that probably is a big part of it. He's never been one for subtlety, and his dialogue just doesn't do anything for me. I feel like there's a story here I would love, but the way he decided to tell it isn't my thing. The monster is a metaphor for his mental state, however the metaphor isn't needed because we see his mental state. Most of the episode is dedicated to Vincent's struggles. We don't need the invisible monster to hammer the point home. Again, I know people love it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I want to like this one. I do. I really do. Maybe it's to do with how mental health is portrayed. Now, I love a bit of drama and hard-hitting topics, however, and again, this may just be because I'm not a fan of the writer's style, but there's a tweeness to this story that doesn't ring true. I find it almost a bit too family-friendly, and I think to do this justice, there needs to be a bit more grit than what is actually there. And again, this is all subjective, and I know you're going to tell me in the comments that I'm wrong, and that's fine, I probably am. I just don't get the hype for this one. It's a decent episode, but for me it never goes any further than that. I just find it too sweet, sickly and syrupy almost. It's just not my style of storytelling, and that's basically what it comes down to. I'm sorry. I can't say it anymore. I'm sorry. Okay, before we go on to the final, I want to talk about what I think is one of the most important aspects of the show. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I like me a monster. Monsters get the kids excited, they get my mum excited, I like it when my mum's happy, so I love a monster. I don't think they need to be in every single episode, and I do think you can do a more character-driven drama, however to earn that, the monsters better have been good up to that point. One of the biggest mistakes this show is constantly making at the moment is it's marketing the leads and the impressive visuals over the fun, scary monsters. Kids couldn't give two shits which famous actor is appearing. They want to see a big green monster. I want to see a big green monster. Series 5 gets the monsters right in both the show and the marketing. The trailers put the monsters front and centre most of the time. They use them like the show's USP, and I think that's the way to go. They just have so much fun with the monsters this season. You've got weeping angels and Daleks and a big floating eye and a weird see-through snake thing. You've got vampires and the Dream Lord and evil pensioners with eyes coming out their mouth. Like, it's so much fun, and even in episodes where the monster isn't big, you still get the fun spooks, like the Cyberhead attacking Amy in the final story. It's just a great scene. You can feel that the monsters excited a lot of the writers this season. They wanted to create something good. The monsters, for the most part, have agency in the plot. Take them away and the story is non-existent, and that's how it should be. Never an afterthought, which I think a lot of modern Who falls into at the moment. The Pandorica opens and the Big Bang are the final two episodes of the season. It's all been building to this. I do think they missed the trick not calling one of these episodes Attack of the Crack, but hey, no one's perfect. I really like the Pandorica opens. I think it is paced incredibly well. It doesn't feel like 45 minutes of pure setup. This episode has its own mysteries, its own climax, its own characterful moments and beats, and I think that's really important for part one of a story. This story just has a sense of scale and epicness to it, which I think is great for the Doctor's first final. You want to see them in action and you want the tension and the threat to be at its highest. You want to give the Doctor something to go up against that isn't just the Monster of the Week format that you've been following, and they accomplish this here. It feels grander, stranger than previous weeks, and it's a refreshing note to go out on. Turning the story of Pandora's Box into the Doctor Who sci-fi adventure is a wonderful idea that is executed perfectly, fitting within the tone of the series. I love the use of Stonehenge. Again, it's using British iconography in the same way America uses theirs in Hollywood blockbusters, and that's just fun to see. I really like River in this story. I always thought that my problems with River started as early as Series 5, but they don't. I think here again they find the perfect balance of a mysterious character, but also someone who has more going for them than just their mystery. Also, one of the most impressive things about Part 1 is how they bring back Rory. This easily could have felt cheap, almost undermining the ending of Cold Blood. However, Moffat finds a way to make it intriguing. He's not just back for the sake of it. It doesn't feel like a cop-out because his return is built completely into the main arc that's being told. And trust me, this is such a massive compliment coming from me. I can't stand it when a show or film just brings characters back that they've killed off. I find it so lazy. My partner is currently forcing me to watch Supernatural, and let's just say if she's expecting a proposal anytime soon, she's fucked it for herself. What is that show? What is it? Rory's return is pitched so well because it forces the audience to wait. We have to sit there with his heartbreak as Amy still can't remember him, and it just allows us to connect on a deeper level with Rory. Obviously we've spent a lot less time with him this season than we have Amy, so his emotional scenes really need to hit the mark to make us care, and they do. It's just lovely writing. Another bit of absolute perfection is the cliffhangers of this episode. My god, they build it up so well. The tension just grows and grows. It's almost relentless. River is trapped, Rory shoots Amy, the Doctor is trapped. River blows up, Amy dies, and the Doctor is still in his tomb. The tension just rises and rises, and honestly it's down to the edit as well. Just go back and watch that scene and see how perfect every cut is. We hold on everything just long enough to get the emotional hit, but not too long that it feels soppy. And then we zoom out. All the stars go out, the music cuts, and suddenly, as promised in episode 1, silence has fallen. Perfect. That's just good telly. That is good telly. And The Big Bang is another good episode. I don't like it as much as the first part, but that's just personal preference. I just find this one slightly less gripping. The emotional beats of the story work, but the actual plot and all the timey stuff doesn't hold my attention as much as part 1 did. I do like how Moffat resolves cliffhangers a lot of the time. I love that he makes us wait a bit, starting somewhere completely unexpected. It gives the episode its own unique feel rather than just a continuation, and I think that's fun. It brings a good energy to the story. I don't think it works every time he does it, but here it's brilliant. And once again, the tone of the series is there from the start, with stars no longer being real. That is so consistent. This series is so tonally consistent. I think perhaps one of the reasons this episode doesn't grab me is because the threat and the tension doesn't feel as interesting as part 1. I know it's end of the universe stuff, like you can't really get much bigger than that, but it doesn't feel as daunting almost as the smaller, more foreboding prison box that is the Pandorica. It still has some magical moments though. I adore the scene when Amy learns that Rory protected her for 2,000 years. It's so simple and yet so romantic. It's Doctor Who sci-fi meets pure unapologetic romance, and it just hits all the right notes. It's beautiful and yet it doesn't feel twee, it doesn't feel overly soppy. It's just written incredibly earnestly, and that's why it works. It's also given just the right amount of screen time, enough for the audience's heart to swell before throwing us back into the action. I'll be honest, this could have gone different, but Moffat showed some restraint. The Doctor revisiting the past, saying his goodbyes is lovely. The scene from Flesh and Stone actually being from this episode is so clever. Like, I was a kid when this aired and it just blew my mind. It is simple time travel storytelling that makes perfect sense, doesn't confuse any audience members, and is just incredibly impactful. And then the final speech at Amelia's bedside is just beautifully pitched. I think this series is really good at showing us Matt Smith's range. He gets to play a lot of different emotions, and he just makes such a well-rounded, interesting character. He's complicated, almost contradictory at times, so then to give him this really quiet, really small scene that just allows him to bring all those subtleties to the surface is just a wonderful decision. The something borrowed, something blue bit always makes me laugh because you just know how fucking proud of himself Moffat was when he wrote that. You can almost feel him beaming with pride as it plays. He loves himself for it, and you know what? Fair play. And then the season ends exactly how it should and fits the tone of the entire 13 episode run. This had to end on a happy note. We needed that they lived happily ever after moment. If a sudden shocking thing happened just before the credits in an attempt to lead us into the Christmas special, it would ruin all the work that came before it. Sometimes happy endings are just as great as a twist or a shock. So, back to the original question. Is Series 5 the best series of Doctor Who? Well, if you think it is, then yeah. Personally, it's not my all-time favourite, but I can easily see why it might be yours. It's very consistent, the character work is great, and the episodes are exciting, with a new energy pulsing through them. There's a few missteps along the way, but nothing that taints the entire story that's being told. Also remember, it's a new creative team, they're finding their feet, and to be honest, they find them pretty quickly. There's a few episodes I wish I liked more, such as Vincent and The Doctor. Again, I'm so sorry, but it's just not for me. The Lodger is annoying at times, but nowhere near as insufferable as some episodes that come later in the era. The performances are all strong, the writing is detailed and yet still fun and whimsical, and it looks great. Honestly, the directing and cinematography in this series is fantastic. So yeah, if it's your favourite series of the show, you've picked a good one. It's not mine, but it's up there, probably in the top 4 or 5 at least, so that's good. Next time we're diving into Series 6, and there is a lot to discuss. River's story becomes a little more convoluted, the Cybermen are at their worst, and the Silents make their first appearance in the show.